Everyone thought he was a pathetic teacher who couldn't stop simping for girls, couldn't teach anything, and didn't care about his students.
Sorry, I can leave.
But in reality, he was the strongest mage with cheat skills. This all begins with a young boy was completely absorbed in a manga that told the story of a brave sorcerer challenging a terrifying demon lord. Standing quietly beside him was a blonde girl, paying close attention as he turned the final pages. When the story ended, the boy couldn't stop thinking about how fearless the magician was for standing up against pure evil. That moment planted a dream in his heart to someday become a mage who fights for what's right. Many years later, the scene shifted to the city of Fight in the Alzano Empire, a place famous for its prestigious magic academy. A blonde student named Rumia was walking through the streets when she noticed a man who had injured his finger. Feeling concerned, she stepped forward and secretly used healing magic to fix the wound. The man was stunned by what he saw, but Rumia quickly begged him not to tell anyone, explaining that casting spells outside school grounds was strictly forbidden. Soon after, her friend Sistine arrived, and the two continued toward the academy together. As they walked, Sistine complained about how their instructor, Mr. Huey, had suddenly quit right before the term started. Rumia calmly replied that the school had already arranged for a temporary replacement. Out of nowhere, a filthy, strange-looking man rushed straight at them. Shocked and irritated, Sistine instantly used wind magic to launch him into the air and splash him into a nearby fountain. When the man crawled back out, instead of being angry, he wore a creepy grin and warned them to stay away from crowded areas. Rumia gently asked Sistine to apologize for attacking him. When they did, the man smugly demanded they kneel, then shamelessly began sizing Rumia up, which pushed Sistine over the edge. Furious, she blasted him back into the fountain again, and the girls hurried away. Inside the academy, a strict teacher with glasses nicknamed Four Eyes was raging in the principal's office. He was furious that the substitute teacher was late on his very first day, and even angrier that the academy hired someone with no clear background. He complained about how hard he had worked to earn his position, unlike this mystery hire. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Sistine and Rumia were growing impatient, as the new teacher still hadn't shown up even after half an hour. When he finally entered, they were stunned to recognize him as the same gross man from earlier. He casually introduced himself as Glenn Radars, their substitute instructor, and immediately began rambling about his personal interests instead of teaching. Sistine snapped at him to start the lesson. At the same time, the headmaster explained to Four Eyes that Glenn had been recommended by senior professors, even though his magical ability was only average and he lacked a teaching license. This made Four Eyes explode in anger, calling Glenn a useless, bottom-tier wizard unfit to educate students. Back in class, Glenn clearly didn't care. He wrote that the students would teach themselves, plopped into his chair, and fell asleep. Enraged, Sistine threw a book at him. Four Eyes later continued trashing Glenn, insulting both him and the professors who supported him, until a beautiful blonde woman named Celica interrupted. She fiercely defended Glenn and warned Four Eyes to take back his words and take it in his ass. Embarrassed, he apologized and stormed out. Celica promised the headmaster she would take responsibility for Glenn, saying only that she wanted him to live properly. After Sistine has kicked Glenn worthless ass, he's forced to teach. The students were stunned by how unbelievably lazy he was. His handwriting was so terrible that no one could read it. When a student asked him to explain a spell he had written, Glenn bluntly admitted he didn't know and told her to look it up herself. Sistine scolded him, saying it was his duty as a teacher to research and explain it later. Glenn insulted the class, told them to use their brains or a dictionary, and bolted the moment the bell rang, leaving everyone shocked. Later, Sistine vented her rage in the locker room while Rumia tried calming her, reminding her that the next class would be supervised in the lab. Suddenly, Glenn barged into the girls' locker room by mistake. Realizing what he'd done, he shut his eyes, claimed he was about to get beaten anyway, and asked about seeing heaven before being attacked. The girls beat him up and threw his ugly ass out. After their lab class was cancelled, Sistine sat outside staring at the sky, feeling annoyed and drained. Rumia joined her with lunch and asked if her obsession with studying was connected to a promise she made to her grandfather about uncovering the truth behind the Sky Fortress Melgalius. Their moment was ruined when Glenn showed up and sat with them. Sistine glared at him as he ate like an animal. Glenn teased her about her small appetite, and tells her that much food won't help plots to grow. She explained she ate lightly to avoid falling asleep, but since Glenn was teaching next, she didn't care anymore. When Sistine stood up to confront him, Glenn shoved food into her mouth and asked if she wants his meat, also made things worse by stealing from her plate. Furious, she demanded to know if he truly thought of himself as a teacher. Glenn confidently shut her down, declaring he was in charge. Later on, Celica was sitting on a rooftop, thinking back to the day she pushed Glenn into taking the substitute teacher role. At that time, she had offered him the position at the Alzano Magic Academy, but Glenn immediately refused, saying he wasn't fit to teach anyone and had no confidence in himself. Celica didn't accept his answer and told him he wasn't allowed to turn it down. When Glenn kept begging her to reconsider, she threatened him, saying she would use her magic on him if he tried refusing again. Terrified, Glenn dropped to his knees and pleaded with her. To prove she was serious, Celica launched a powerful flame spell at him, which he barely managed to dodge. In Glenn's second period class, he pulled the exact same stunt, self-study again, then he slept at his desk the whole time. Sistine was completely fed up. She stood up and announced she came from the noble magic family of Fable, and threatened to get Glenn fired by telling her father. But Glenn shocked her by basically begging, "Yes please, get me fired." Sistine was stunned. Angry and humiliated, she took off her glove and threw it at him, challenging him to a magic duel. Rumia panicked and asked her to apologize and take it back, but the other students were hyped and wanted to see it. Glenn asked Sistine what she wanted from this. Sistine demanded he fix his attitude and do his job seriously. Glenn agreed, but only if, when he won, Sistine would have to fulfill any request he made. While looking at her, Glenn remembered a woman from his past who had that same tsundere vibe. Then he picked up the glove and accepted the duel. That evening, in the academy courtyard, Glenn faced Sistine with the whole class watching. Glenn explained the rules. Only one spell was allowed: Shockwave. Sistine agreed. The students thought Glenn was taking it lightly, but one nerd explained Shockwave is a universal spell used in many situations, and it's one of the first spells every mage learns. The duel would be decided by who could shrink the chant down into a single line and fire it off quickly. Sistine got nervous for a second but refused to back down. She attacked first and blasted Glenn with Shockwave easily. Glenn didn't even try dodging and went down in under 5 seconds. Sistine thought maybe she misunderstood the rules, but Glenn stood back up and claimed he let her win because it was a 3-round duel. But the moment Glenn tried chanting his spell, Sistine stunned him again before he could even finish. Glenn got frustrated and changed it into a 5-round duel, clearly trying to buy time and mess with her focus. Sistine still stunned him again. Sistine then asked why he can't even reduce the spell to 1 line. Glenn acted offended and said shortening chants is basically heresy. He denied it had anything to do with him being unable to do it. Even with all his excuses, Sistine declared herself the winner and reminded him about the deal. But Glenn suddenly denied ever promising anything. Sistine and Rumia were both shocked. Glenn then acted like he was being generous, saying he'd let her off this time and called it a close victory, but warned her she wouldn't beat him next time. Then he walked away like nothing happened, leaving the entire crowd stunned, and Sistine furious. Several days passed. Sistine was still upset with Glenn. He had ignored their duel deal and returned to acting lazy in class, which made her even angrier. One day, a student named Lynn walked up to Glenn and asked him to explain a spell written in an old style. Before Glenn could answer, Sistine stepped in and told Lynn not to ask him anything about magic. She said she would help instead, clearly showing she didn't trust Glenn at all. Glenn didn't argue. Instead, he calmly asked if magic was really that important. Sistine replied in a sharp voice that magic is the study of how the world works. She said it explains where the world came from, how it is built, the rules it follows, and even why humans exist. Glenn questioned her again. He asked how studying all this actually helped people and why magic mattered more than things like medicine, machines, or farming. Sistine tried to stay calm. She said, magic isn't meant to give quick results and is about understanding the truth of the world and humanity. Glenn stepped closer and coldly said that magic is best at hurting people and that nothing is more powerful when it comes to causing harm. Those words hurt deeply. Unable to control herself, Sistine slapped him in front of the class and ran out crying. Glenn stayed behind, sitting quietly and thinking. He wondered why magic was praised so much. Feeling tired of everything, he decided to quit teaching and planned to apologize to Celica, hoping she would finally let him leave the academy. On his way, Glenn saw Rumia inside the lab, drawing a magic circle on the floor. She said she was practicing how to make magic circles properly. Glenn pointed out what she was missing, brought mercury, poured it along the circle, and told her to activate it without skipping steps. Rumia followed his instructions and succeeded. Glenn looked surprised but said it wasn't hard. Still, it reminded him of how interested he once was in magic as a child. Afterward, Rumia asked if he enjoyed helping her. Glenn said he hated magic. When she asked about his life before teaching, Glenn said he had been lonely and useless, depending on Celica for the past year. He didn't want to talk more and changed the topic, asking why Rumia cared so much about magic. Rumia explained that she wanted magic to help people. She also wanted to repay the Sorcerer of Justice, who saved her life 3 years ago when evil mages almost killed her. That moment changed her life, and she decided to dedicate herself to magic. Glenn almost asked her something but stopped. Before leaving, Rumia gently asked him to apologize to Sistine, explaining that magic reminds Sistine of her late grandfather. At home, Sistine sat alone in her room, feeling sad. She remembered her grandfather's final days. He had dreamed of reaching the Sky Castle, and she promised herself she would become strong enough to achieve what he never could. The next day, Glenn shocked everyone. Before class began, he bowed to Sistine and apologized for what he said about magic. He admitted he went too far, even though he still disliked magic personally. When class started, Glenn insulted the students, saying they knew very little about magic despite attending a magic academy. One student mocked him and said he was just a weak wizard who couldn't even use shockwave properly. Glenn decided to prove them wrong. He recited the full spell without shortening it, wrote it on the board, and asked what would happen if the spell was spoken in 4 parts instead of 3. Then he showed them. The shockwave changed direction and moved to the side. The students were shocked. Glenn explained that changing how a spell is spoken can change how it works. He said true magic mastery means being able to control spells in many ways. Glenn then explained that magic works through the human mind and is similar to deep self-belief. He suddenly told Sistine he liked her the moment he saw her, making her blush. He used her reaction to explain how words affect the mind. Annoyed, Sistine threw her book at him. Glenn continued calmly. He showed he could use the spell with very little effort. He explained that magic changes the subconscious, and that books alone cannot teach real magic. He promised to teach them the basics needed to become true magicians. In the headmaster's office, Celica was happy to hear that Glenn had become popular, and that students from other classes were watching his lessons. Four Eyes was clearly annoyed. Celica proudly said that Glenn was her student and that she trained him from the beginning. After school, Glenn stood outside looking at the sky, thinking about his future. Celica joined him and said she was happy with his progress. She asked him to give extra classes so students could catch up. Rumia and Sistine approached to ask about the syllabus. Glenn felt proud until Sistine said bluntly that he was the last person she wanted help from. Later at home, Sistine admitted that Glenn's lesson was actually impressive, even though she still found him annoying. Rumia smiled and remembered how they used to argue when they first lived together, but later became close friends. She said she believed Sistine and Glenn would eventually understand each other too. Meanwhile, in a dark alley, 2 men secretly talked about a plan involving the academy. One of them said everything would happen during the academy meeting the next day. The next morning, Glenn ran toward the academy, late as usual. When he arrived, he stopped in shock. The academy was empty. No students. No teachers. No staff. When he noticed someone nearby, he called out. The man stepped forward and mocked Glenn, saying it was impressive that someone smart could still be such a useless wizard. When Glenn asked who he was, the man said it didn't matter because Glenn was about to die. Then he attacked Glenn with magic. At the same time, the students were sitting inside the classroom, waiting for Glenn to arrive. Sistine sat quietly at her desk, thinking about how strange things had become. Not long ago, Glenn was hated by everyone. Now, people around the academy were starting to talk about him more and more. Suddenly, 2 unknown men walked into the classroom. They calmly said that Glenn was busy and had sent them instead. Sistine immediately stood up and told them that outsiders were not allowed inside academy classrooms. One of the men lifted his hand and cast a spell on her. It did not hurt her body, but it sealed her voice. Sistine was shocked. She could feel how strong the spell was. It was not normal magic. It was the kind used by trained soldiers. The men then said they were there for Rumia. Rumia froze in fear and stayed silent. One of the men slowly walked around the classroom and asked the students where Rumia was. Sistine stepped forward bravely and demanded to know what they wanted with her. The man laughed at Sistine and mocked her. Then he directly threatened Rumia. Seeing her classmates in danger, Rumia finally spoke up and revealed herself. The men ordered her to come with them. Sistine tried to stop her, but Rumia gently shook her head and told her not to worry. She said she believed Glenn would come and save them. The men smiled confidently and said Glenn had already been taken care of. Then they shocked everyone by calling Rumia by her true name, Hermione, and saying she should never have survived. One of the men grabbed Sistine and dragged her into a laboratory. He tied her tightly to a table. It was clear he planned to harm her. At first, Sistine tried to stay strong, but when the man began pulling at her clothes, fear took over. She broke down and begged him to stop. At that moment, Glenn suddenly walked into the room. He acted confused and apologized for interrupting. When Sistine cried out for help, Glenn slowly turned around and faced the attacker. The man pointed his finger at Glenn and prepared to attack. Sistine screamed for Glenn to run, believing he had no chance. The man said it was already too late and released an explosion spell. Nothing happened. Glenn was completely unharmed. The attacker tried again, but Glenn still stood there without a scratch. Glenn then took out a strange card called the Fool Arcana. In an instant, all magic in the area stopped working. This also meant Glenn could not use magic either. The attacker laughed, thinking Glenn was now helpless. Instead, Glenn punched him hard. A close-range fight began. Even without magic, Glenn easily overpowered the man. Sistine watched in shock. Lying on the floor, the man asked if Glenn had also defeated his partner, Carol. Glenn calmly replied, yes, and added that Carol was tied up naked in the middle of the city with a sign. The attacker could not believe that Glenn had defeated both of them using only his fists. Glenn mocked the man and pretended he was about to use some legendary spell. Instead, he kicked him hard and explained to Sistine that real magic is about confusing and tricking your enemy. Glenn tied the man up and began questioning him. Sistine quickly told Glenn that the other intruder had taken Rumia away. Glenn noticed a strange symbol burned into the man's shoulder. He immediately contacted Celica using his bracelet. Glenn explained the situation and revealed that the attackers belonged to a secret dark wizard group called the Divine Wisdom Seekers. Glenn asked Celica to contact the Mage Court and investigate whether any academy teachers were involved. He said, breaking into the academy should have been impossible. Celica replied that making such requests would be very difficult. Glenn argued that students' lives were in danger. Celica reminded him that she no longer had the authority to approve such actions. She told him to stay alive until she arrived and warned him that the academy's teleport system might have been sabotaged. Sistine wanted to chase after Rumia immediately. Glenn stopped her and warned that it would be too dangerous. Angry and scared, Sistine said that maybe Glenn was right and that magic was useless if it could not protect Rumia. Glenn firmly replied that Rumia studied magic to help others. He promised he would never allow her to be taken or killed. Suddenly, the tied-up man began laughing loudly. He mocked Glenn and called him a soul thief just like them. He then said this was the summoning magic of their leader, Rick. Skeleton warriors suddenly appeared and started moving toward them. Everyone was shocked when one skeleton suddenly turned and killed the man who summoned them with a single sword strike. Sistine immediately used magic to strengthen Glenn's fists. Glenn punched the skeleton and smashed its skull. They ran from the laboratory. Glenn told Sistine to use her storm spell to cover their escape. He warned her that he would fail her if she could not cast it correctly. While Glenn fought the skeletons to buy time, Sistine focused hard and remembered how Glenn and Rumia controlled their magic. When she released the spell, the skeletons were still standing. Glenn encouraged her and told her she had done well. Then Glenn pulled out a red stone from his pocket and activated a forbidden black magic spell. A powerful extinction ray shot forward, destroying the skeletons and part of the academy building. The spell caused heavy damage to Glenn's body. He collapsed to the ground, pale and coughing blood. He forced himself to stand again and told Sistine they needed to move somewhere safer. Before they could escape, the leader of the intruders appeared. He praised Glenn for defeating his followers and attacked him with floating magic swords. Glenn asked Sistine if she had enough strength left to cast the Dispel spell. Completely exhausted, she said she could not. Realizing this, Glenn pushed her away to protect her and faced the leader alone. The leader attacked Glenn and wounded him badly in the chest. Glenn tried to cast the spell, but the leader cancelled it instantly and laughed at how slow Glenn was. Just as the leader prepared to strike again, Glenn surprised him by using a light spear spell. The leader barely dodged and mocked Glenn, offering him different ways to die. Glenn calmly replied that he was only a temporary mage. The leader attacked again and stabbed Glenn through the body. As Glenn began chanting a Dispel spell, the leader laughed and said Glenn did not have enough power. At that moment, Sistine returned. Using her last remaining strength, she completed the Dispel spell. The magic sword stopped working. Glenn grabbed one sword, erased all magic again with the Fool Arcana, and stabbed the leader, defeating him. Sistine walked toward Glenn. Glenn admitted he was surprised she understood his plan when he pushed her away earlier. He said he was only 70% sure she would understand. As they tried to move, Glenn collapsed from pain. Sistine grabbed his hand and tried to heal him. As Glenn lost consciousness, memories from his childhood filled his mind, his dream of becoming a wizard who protects people. When Glenn slowly opened his eyes later, his body still felt heavy. The first thing he noticed was Sistine sleeping next to him, sitting close and watching over him until she passed out. Soon after, Celica contacted Glenn and explained the situation. She said the Academy's teleport system had been messed with. Because of this, the security barrier was now active and trapping everyone inside the Academy grounds. Celica added something even more serious. The teleport circuits were not simply damaged or turned off. Someone was rewriting them completely. Glenn immediately understood the real danger. This wasn't to trap people, it was to allow the intruders to escape later. Glenn quickly asked where the closest teleport circuit was. Celica replied that reaching it would take half a day. Glenn knew right away that they did not have that much time left. Before moving again, Glenn looked at Sistine and quietly thanked her for staying by his side and helping him recover. At the same time, deep inside the Academy Tower, Rumia was being held prisoner. She was still trying to stay calm when Glenn suddenly burst into the room. Glenn instantly confronted the man behind everything. The man cut him off and proudly said the plan was almost finished. In 10 minutes, the teleport system would be fully rewritten and Rumia would be sent to their organization. Then the man revealed the final part of his plan. He planned to sacrifice himself using magic to create a huge explosion that would completely destroy the academy. Rumia cried out in shock and called him Huey, begging him to stop. Glenn froze. Huey calmly explained that years ago, he had been placed inside the academy as a living bomb, waiting for the right time. He mocked Glenn and said Glenn had to choose either stop the teleportation or save the academy, but not both. Glenn didn't hesitate. He bit into his hand until blood flowed and used it to break the first layer of the teleportation circle. Huey warned him that only one of 5 layers had been disabled. Glenn ignored him and kept going. As Glenn forced himself forward, Rumia begged him to stop. She was terrified that he would die if he continued. Glenn told her calmly that he had always dreamed of becoming a wizard of justice, and that he was ready to give his life for that dream. By the time Glenn reached the final layer, his body was breaking down. He was coughing blood and could barely move. He crawled toward the magic circle. But before he could finish the spell, his strength gave out and he collapsed. Seeing this, Rumia refused to give up. She rushed to Glenn and used her healing magic to bring him back. She told him not to stop now. When Glenn opened his eyes again, he felt a strong wave of power rush through him. In that moment, he realized the truth. Rumia could strengthen another mage's power just by touching them. With Rumia supporting him, Glenn was able to completely shut down the teleport circle. This stopped both the explosion and Rumia's kidnapping. Huey fell to the floor, defeated. He admitted that he had lost and wondered if he should obey his orders and die or choose another path. Glenn walked up to him and said he would face punishment for what he had done. Then Glenn knocked him out with a single punch. Not long after, Sistine arrived at the top of the tower. She saw Huey unconscious and Glenn resting in Rumia's arms. Rumia gently signaled for Sistine to stay quiet so Glenn could rest. Later, Glenn sat silently, deep in thought. He realized that Rumia was actually Princess Ermiana, the royal daughter believed to have died from illness 3 years ago. Celica confirmed that only she and the headmaster knew the truth. Celica then asked Glenn why he decided to remain a teacher after refusing the job at first. Glenn looked down and saw Rumia and Sistine waving up at him. He smiled and said he stayed because he wanted to see what they would become, and maybe because he enjoyed wasting a little time with them. A few days after the intruder incident, Commander Zelos, the leader of the Imperial Guard, met with Queen Alicia. They discussed her upcoming visit to the Alzano Magic Academy. Zelos promised that he would personally handle her protection. When he started to mention Princess Ermiana, the Queen stopped him and said she already knew. She admitted that Ermiana might be angry after 3 years, but she was happy her daughter had lived peacefully. Back at the academy, Glenn was in the principal's office begging for an advance on his salary. He was completely broke and starving. Celica pointed out that Glenn's money problems were caused by his own laziness earlier in the year. Glenn tried to defend himself, but the principal interrupted. The principal suggested that Glenn could earn extra money by entering his class into the upcoming magic competition and winning. Glenn immediately liked the idea. At the same time, Sistine and Rumia were asking students to sign up for the competition, but no one wanted to join. They felt they had no chance of winning. Suddenly, Glenn burst into the classroom full of confidence and announced that everyone would participate and that they would win. Sistine worried that Glenn might cause trouble again. But Glenn grabbed the sign-up sheet and began assigning roles. He placed Sistine and 2 classmates into the hardest combat matches. He assigned Rumia to mental defense battles. When Wendy complained about being assigned symbol decoding, Glenn explained that even though she was nervous and clumsy, she was actually very skilled and could earn many points. Sistine slowly realized something important. Glenn had carefully watched everyone and understood their strengths and weaknesses. She began to see that he wasn't careless at all. Sistine suggested that only top students should compete, like other departments usually do. Glenn felt nervous, disagreeing with her, but he stood firm. He said everyone should participate so they could grow stronger and gain experience. After class, Glenn began to worry. Other departments focused only on their best students. As he walked through the academy, he saw students arguing in the courtyard and tried to calm them. Then Four Eyes appeared. Four Eyes confidently said his department would win the competition because he was leading them. He mocked Glenn for including weak students. Glenn warned him not to underestimate his class and hinted they might surprise him. Then Glenn made a risky move. He bet 3 months of his salary on his class winning. The moment the words left his mouth, Glenn regretted it. Four Eyes accepted immediately. Glenn thought about backing out, but before he could, Sistine stepped forward. She told Four Eyes he had no right to control the training grounds and warned him she would report him if he continued. Angry, Four Eyes left with his students, promising that Glenn's class would regret this. Encouraged by Sistine's support, Glenn trained his students intensely over the next few days. He taught new spells, studied strategies, and made sure everyone was ready. The night before the competition, Rumia sat alone holding a necklace. Memories from her past returned standing among fallen bodies, and the Wizard of Justice comforting her and promising protection. Sistine entered and said dinner was ready. She noticed Rumia hiding something, but Rumia changed the subject and reminded her that the competition would start tomorrow and the Queen would be watching. The next day, Queen Alicia traveled to the academy. Her maid noticed she was in a good mood, likely because she would see her daughter. The maid gave her a necklace with blue jewels. When the Queen arrived, she announced the start of the magic competition, and the crowd cheered. Glenn, however, was distracted by his empty stomach growling loudly. Rumia noticed that her mother was not wearing the necklace with their picture, which made her feel a little sad. Glenn's class performed well in the first match and placed third. They were excited and believed they could do even better by following Glenn's advice. Their excitement ended when Chryse, a student from Four Eyes' class, mocked them and said they were just lucky. Four Eyes added that third place would make a nice memory. Glenn's students talked back, saying they wouldn't lose. Glenn, however, still felt uneasy. Nearby, Celica sat next to Queen Alicia and watched the competition. She asked the Queen what she thought of Glenn. The Queen said he seemed ordinary, but he always found a way to surprise people. Behind the scenes, a guard whispered something to Zelos, causing his face to suddenly turn serious. As the tournament continued, Glenn began to notice something unexpected. His class was doing better and better in the remaining events. Each win gave him more confidence. Slowly, hope grew inside him. He started believing that his students might actually succeed, and that he might finally earn the reward he needed. The mood changed during the mental resistance battle. The student from another class, named Jael, spoke directly to Rumia. He warned her to quit while she still could, saying he would not show mercy. Rumia answered calmly. She said she planned to continue because she wanted to support her classmates and help her group finish in second place. From the sidelines, Glenn and Sistine watched carefully. Then Gibble stormed over, clearly angry. He accused Glenn of sending Rumia into danger just to prove his own ideas. Glenn stayed calm and replied that Rumia was emotionally strong and mentally balanced. He believed those qualities made her perfect for this match, and he trusted her completely. The round began with Count Zest stepping forward as the official judge. He announced that the first test would involve a spell that caused drowsiness. The students reacted quickly, using magic to resist it. Rumia stayed alert and passed the test without trouble. Next, Zest released a spell that disturbed the mind. One competitor failed to handle it and was removed from the match. Rumia remained focused and advanced again. Soon, only two fighters were left, Rumia and Jael, who had been the champion the year before. For the final test, Count Zest used his strongest ability. This spell attacked the mind directly and could knock someone unconscious. Even Zest was surprised when both fighters remained standing. Jael looked at Rumia and asked why she refused to give up. Rumia answered honestly. She said Glenn had told them that victory was something they would reach together. Not alone. Jael laughed and insulted Glenn, calling him a foolish instructor. Rumia immediately spoke up, saying Glenn was actually kind and enjoyable as a teacher. Since the fight was still not ending, Zest increased the spell's strength. Rumia dropped to her knees, struggling to stay awake. Zest asked if she wished to surrender. Before she could answer, Glenn suddenly stepped forward and declared that their team was withdrawing. Rumia was shocked and wanted to keep going, but Glenn gently stopped her. He told her she had already done enough, and that her opponent was far stronger than expected. Sistine stood beside them and reassured Rumia, saying there was no reason to continue when she was clearly hurting. Rumia admitted she enjoyed the match and felt proud to fight for everyone. Just as the announcer walked toward Jael to praise him, something unexpected happened. Jael collapsed where he stood. He had lost consciousness. This meant Rumia had actually won, even though she stepped back. When the victory was announced, Sistine hugged Rumia tightly. No one had expected this result. From a distance, Queen Alicia watched the scene quietly. Seeing Rumia smile among her friends made her happy. Celica suggested the Queen speak with Rumia, but Alicia refused. She said leaving her daughter was a mistake that could not be undone. As Glenn stood with his cheering students, he noticed a young man and a young woman, observing from afar with serious expressions. Glenn's class later finished in second place overall, and the competition continued. Glenn, however, looked exhausted. The two observers were Albert and Rel. Rel wanted to approach Glenn, but Albert stopped her. He reminded her that their task was to watch the Imperial Guard, since there were rumors of problems inside it. Later, during the lunch break, Glenn walked through the park with an empty stomach. He had no money and no food. Nearby, his students laughed and ate happily. Glenn approached him and asked if she could change the event she was assigned to. Glenn asked which one she preferred, and she said transformation magic. Glenn smiled and told her the competition was not about pressure. He said everyone should enjoy themselves. He explained that transformation spells work best when the caster clearly imagines the form they want to take. Without a clear image, the spell would fail. When Glenn asked what she hoped to transform into, Lynn said she wanted to become the Angel of Time, Latika. Glenn encouraged her and told her to try without fear. He said losing was not something to be ashamed of. After Lynn left, Sistine walked up to Glenn, thinking Rumia had come to invite him to eat. Glenn noticed the food and tried to trick her into giving it to him. He created a fake illusion, acting as if there were two versions of himself, and grabbed the food. Sistine instantly cancelled the spell, realized it was Glenn, and blasted him away. He flew through the air and crashed into the trees. Glenn landed on a bench, still thinking about how hungry he was. A short time later, Rumia arrived carrying food. The moment Glenn saw it, his face lit up. He ate the sandwich quickly and asked who made it. Rumia said she was not good at cooking and refused to say who prepared it. She explained that the food was meant for someone else, but since she could not give it to them, she did not want it wasted. Glenn joked that he felt like a trash bin, but he thanked her sincerely. Suddenly, a woman approached Glenn and asked to speak with him privately. Without looking up, Glenn said he would be busy after eating. When he finally looked up, both he and Rumia froze. It was Queen Alicia. Elsewhere, Zelos realized the queen was missing and immediately ordered guards to search the area. Celica, who had hidden the queen using magic, joked about how nervous the guards were. Then Eleanor, the queen's maid, quietly approached Celica and revealed the truth. She had placed a cursed necklace on the queen, one meant to take her life for the plans of the divine wisdom seekers. Celica was stunned to learn Eleanor was part of the group. Meanwhile, Glenn knelt before Queen Alicia. She asked him to stand and tried to apologize for how he had been treated after leaving the Mage Corps. Glenn awkwardly replied that he left because he hated the job and felt like a failure. He said she did not need to apologize and asked why she came without guards. Alicia then turned to Rumia and called her Ermiana. She asked how her life with the Tingle family had been. Rumia denied it. She said her name was Rumia Tingle, and that Ermiana no longer existed. Hurt by the response, Alicia apologized and left, realizing her daughter was not ready. Before leaving, Alicia asked Glenn to look after Rumia. As she walked away, guards surrounded her, and Zelos said he would personally protect her. Far away, Albert used his special ability and saw the guards escorting the queen. Rel suggested they move to rescue her immediately. Back at the academy, the competition continued. The students performed well, but Glenn was distracted by thoughts of Ermiana's past. Sistine broke his focus by asking where Rumia had gone. Glenn explained what happened, and said Rumia likely needed time alone. He decided to go find her and ask Sistine to watch over the class while he was gone. Later, Rumia was sitting quietly in a hidden spot, holding a small necklace in her hands. The necklace reminded her of her real mother. Glenn eventually found her there. When he looked closely, he noticed that the necklace had no gem or symbol inside it anymore. He softly told Rumia that he already knew who she really was and how she was connected to Queen Alicia. Rumia slowly opened up. She said she understood why her mother had left her behind. The queen believed Rumia was cursed and could bring danger to the royal family. Even though Rumia understood this reason, she was still hurt and angry. She said she couldn't forgive Alicia for abandoning her. At the same time, she felt guilty. She worried that thinking about her real mother meant betraying the Tingle family, who had raised her with kindness. Glenn listened without interrupting. He told her that people often make choices out of fear and regret them later. Those choices can hurt others even if they are not meant to. He told Rumia that instead of forcing an answer, she should listen to her heart. When he asked what she truly wanted, Rumia lowered her eyes and said she didn't know yet. Glenn then talked about his own past. He explained that he once worked as a magician in the Imperial Army. During that time, he saw the queen many times. He remembered that Alicia always wore a necklace very similar to Rumia's. Hearing this made Rumia pause. She asked Glenn if he would stand beside her if she decided to meet the queen. Glenn agreed immediately, knowing how heavy that choice was. Before they could leave, Imperial guards suddenly appeared. They surrounded Rumia and pointed their swords at her. They accused her of planning to assassinate Queen Alicia. Without hesitation, they announced her execution for betraying the royal family. Glenn stepped forward and blocked them. He demanded evidence and said no one could be killed without a proper trial. One guard coldly replied that the order came directly from the queen. He warned Glenn that interfering would label him a traitor and lead to his death as well. To Glenn's shock, Rumia accepted the guard's decision. She said she believed she deserved punishment for betraying the queen. She begged them not to hurt Glenn. Glenn tried to stop them, but a guard struck him with the back of a sword, knocking him unconscious. The guards dragged Rumia behind a tree. They told her to shut her eyes so the end would be fast. As she did, Rumia thought this fate had always been waiting for her. She believed the queen had come to see her one last time before ordering her death. Then everything changed. When Rumia opened her eyes, Glenn was standing in front of her. He had saved her. Confused and shaken, she asked why he came back for her. Glenn answered that leaving her behind was never an option. He also said the queen would never sentence her to death without a fair trial. Glenn lifted Rumia and jumped onto a rooftop using magic. They escaped the guards and moved quickly across the city. Glenn considered breaking into the palace, but instead guided Rumia into a narrow alley and contacted Celica. Celica told Glenn she couldn't act yet. She was with the queen and surrounded by guards. She hinted that Glenn himself was the key to solving this situation, and urged him to face the queen directly. When the call ended, Glenn realized the situation was far more dangerous than he expected, especially with Commander Zelos involved. At that moment, Albert and Rel appeared. Rel attacked Glenn with her sword. Glenn and Rumia barely avoided the strike. When her blade broke, Rel used magic to create another one. Glenn tried to defend himself, but Rel dodged every spell. Then Albert suddenly stopped her attack, blocking her sword before it could hit Glenn. Rumia asked who they were. Glenn explained that Albert and Rel were his former allies from the Imperial Army. Albert revealed that the Imperial Guard was surrounding the Queen and planning to kill Princess Ermiana. He said he had a way to slip past the guards. Rel suggested fighting through the guards directly, but Glenn rejected the idea. He chose to trust Celica's judgment and waited for the right chance. Meanwhile, the magic competition continued without Glenn. His students felt unsure and discouraged. Then Albert and Rel appeared again, this time wearing official uniforms. They told the class that Glenn had asked them to guide the students until he returned. Sistine chose to believe them. She told her classmates to give everything they had and win, so Glenn wouldn't tease them later. Elsewhere, Four Eyes felt confident. With Glenn gone, he believed his class would dominate. In the transformation match, his student Seda turned into a giant red dragon and earned high scores. This made Lynn nervous. Albert spoke to Lynn using the same advice Glenn once gave her. Encouraged, Lynn stepped forward. She focused deeply and transformed into Idera, the Angel of Time, earning even more points than Seda. Four Eyes lost his temper. The competition continued, and Glenn's class kept climbing higher. Soon, they reached first place. Only one match remained. At the same time, Glenn carried Rumia across rooftops, while Zelos, furious at his guards' failure, ordered them to hunt down and kill the princess. Back at the arena, everything rested on Sistine. She faced Heinkel, who attacked with a massive wall of fire. Sistine was knocked down but stood back up. Thinking of her classmates, she unleashed her windstorm spell, blowing Heinkel out of the ring and securing victory. The students exploded with cheers. Meanwhile, Glenn and Rumia were trapped in an alley. At the same moment, the award ceremony began. Albert and Rel stepped forward to accept medals for the class. Celica realized Glenn was using this moment to approach the queen. Suddenly, Glenn and Rumia appeared, breaking the disguise magic. Zelos ordered the guards to attack, but Celica raised a huge barrier. Inside it stood Glenn, Rumia, Celica, Zelos, and Queen Alicia. Glenn accused Zelos of using the queen's name to justify killing Rumia. Zelos declared that protecting the queen mattered more than anything. Then, to everyone's horror, Alicia ordered Zelos to place his sword at Rumia's throat and said she regretted giving birth to her. Glenn sensed something was wrong. Remembering Celica's words, he asked the queen about the necklace she wore and whether she truly wanted to keep it. She denied it. Glenn rushed forward. Zelos knocked him down. Just before the killing blow, Alicia tore the necklace off and threw it away. It shattered on the ground. Glenn kicked Zelos aside and realized the necklace was cursed and meant to kill its wearer. Zelos demanded to know why the curse failed. Glenn explained that he had erased all magic using the Fool Arcana. Overwhelmed, Alicia ran to Rumia, hugged her tightly, and apologized through tears. As the barrier vanished, guards rushed in, stunned by the truth. Elsewhere, Albert and Rel confronted Eleanor. She admitted her role but escaped using the Akashic records. Albert and Rel reported this to Glenn and left to continue their mission. Later that night, Celica met with Queen Alicia before her departure. Alicia thanked her and asked her to look after Rumia. Rumia later told Glenn she felt lighter after finally facing her mother. She asked how Glenn knew Alicia didn't truly mean her cruel words. Glenn explained that years ago, when Rumia was kidnapped, the queen had begged him to help find her, crying and breaking down in despair. He knew her pain came from love, not hatred. At peace, Glenn went to join the students' victory party. He planned to treat everyone using his bonus and salary. But when he arrived, he panicked. The students were acting drunk after eating too many fermented cakes. The panic grew worse when the restaurant owner handed Glenn the bill. The amount was exactly equal to his bonus plus 3 months of his salary. Several days later, Glenn took Sistine far outside the academy at night. Trees surrounded them, and the place was quiet. Glenn told her this training would be intense. After a long time, Sistine collapsed and said she couldn't move anymore. Glenn explained that this kind of training would sharpen her awareness. It would help her notice danger faster and react better in real magic fights. Sistine then realized something strange. Glenn wasn't teaching spells. He was training her body. He said this was hand-to-hand combat. Glenn explained that once she learned to fight up close, he would teach her real battlefield magic. Sistine felt unsure about learning physical fighting, but Glenn told her the truth. This strength would let her protect Rumia if something bad happened. It would also help her stay strong against dark magic. Hearing this, Sistine felt fired up and asked Glenn to keep guiding her no matter what. The next morning, while walking to school, Sistine and Rumia noticed Glenn sitting beside the fountain. He looked exhausted. They assumed he hadn't slept because he was worried about Rumia, but Glenn quickly denied it. Before they could say more, a sword suddenly flew toward him. Glenn barely blocked it in time. The attacker was Rel. Calmly, she said this was how she greeted people. Glenn stared at her in disbelief. Sistine remembered Rel from the competition where she had fought alongside Albert. When Glenn noticed Rel wearing a school uniform, he understood. The Empire had sent her to secretly watch over Rumia while pretending to be a student. To everyone's surprise, Rel said she wanted to guard Glenn instead. Glenn panicked and told her to never say that out loud. He warned her to hide her true identity. They entered the academy together. Glenn introduced Rel as a transfer student. When she spoke, she nearly exposed herself, but Glenn whispered corrections. When a student asked how she knew Glenn, Rel answered in a way that made everyone think they were romantically involved, leaving the room silent. During training class, Rel struggled with the shockwave spell. She missed again and again. Sistine couldn't understand how someone from the army could fail something so basic. Glenn sensed something was wrong and asked Rel directly. Rel asked if she had to use that spell. Glenn said it was required for long-range practice, but she could choose another way. Rel then summoned her massive sword out of thin air. She threw it with terrifying force. The target was destroyed instantly. The class froze in shock. Glenn realized Rel's true strength was far beyond everyone else's. Later, Rel ate lunch with Sistine and Rumia. Students whispered in fear and amazement. Glenn spoke privately with Celica, saying he hoped Rel would slowly learn how to live like a normal person. A few days later, Glenn took the class on a trip to Senia Island. At the harbor, some students stopped near a sailor's stall. Glenn stiffened and ordered them away. He revealed the sailor was actually Albert in disguise. Albert removed his cloak and said he was secretly guarding Rumia, while Rel acted as bait. Albert warned Glenn to keep watching Rel closely. Later, they boarded a boat. Glenn became terribly seasick. Sistine suggested changing plans, but Glenn refused. Rumia laughed and teased him. Glenn admitted the truth. He wanted to see everyone enjoying themselves in swimsuits. While others swam, Glenn rested on the sand. He noticed Gibble sitting alone with a book. Glenn asked why he wasn't playing. Gibble said he wasn't there for fun. Sistine, Rumia, and Rel dragged him into a volleyball game. They played until the sun went down. That night, some boys tried sneaking into the girls' rooms. Glenn caught them instantly. A fight broke out when the boys tried to overpower him. Rel watched from above and said Glenn used to look empty and sad. That was why she chose to stay near him. Later, everyone gathered inside to play games. Sistine and Rumia noticed Rel finally laughing like a normal girl. Much later, Glenn sat alone near the water, thinking quietly. Nearby, Rel, Sistine, and Rumia watched shooting stars. Glenn stayed back, leaning against a tree. When night grew quiet, Glenn saw Rel still awake. She walked over and asked why he left her in the past. Glenn admitted it was a mistake. Rel confessed she didn't know who she was without him. Glenn tried to help her understand. He said she looked happy earlier and could live freely as a student. Rel rejected this idea and said protecting him was her only purpose. Glenn told her her brother would want her to find her own happiness. Hurt deeply, Rel ran away crying and shouted that she hated Sistine and Rumia. Glenn sighed, knowing this problem was deeper than he thought. The next day, Rel acted cold and distracted. She stumbled, and when Sistine and Rumia tried to help, she yelled at them. Glenn explained that Rel was upset because of something he had said. He asked them not to blame themselves. At the research lab, Director Baldi welcomed the class. He showed experiments mixing science and white magic. The students were amazed, especially by creatures created through experiments. Rumia asked if changing life was truly right. Sistine agreed, saying power without limits leads to darkness. Baldi praised her thinking. Baldi then spoke about a banned project that attempted resurrection using DNA, spirit data, and energy. It was stopped because many lives were needed for one revival. He added that a secret group might have stolen the research. When Sistine asked what was missing, Baldi said original magic, something extremely rare. That evening, Rumia tried to speak to Rel, but Rel avoided her. Glenn tried next, but Rel shoved him away and ran toward the beach. Glenn explained to the others that Rel looked mature but emotionally was still a child. He said he would handle it himself. As Rel cried alone, she suddenly saw her brother appear. Far away, Albert sensed something wrong. He realized it was an illusion. As he moved, Eleanor appeared. Albert attacked, but she escaped into the trees. They fought fiercely. Eleanor summoned dark spirits, and Albert struck them with lightning. Eleanor healed herself easily. Albert realized then that Eleanor was far stronger than any enemy he had faced before and that capturing her could change everything. At the same time, Sistine and Rumia were sitting quietly inside their room. Both of them were thinking about Rel. Sistine remembered the time they spent together near the sea. She recalled how Rel laughed and played like a normal girl. That memory made Sistine realize something important. Rel truly wanted friends. She wasn't pretending at all. Wanting to cheer her up, Sistine suggested that they go outside and buy some things before Glenn and Rel came back. Elsewhere, Rel was facing a shocking sight. Standing in front of her was her older brother, someone she believed had died long ago after being taken by a hidden group. He explained that he survived and had been trapped for years. Now, he needed her help to finally escape. He told her the only way was to cooperate with the group one last time. He asked her to help take Rumia and get past Glenn, who was protecting her. Rel felt completely torn. Glenn, Sistine, and Rumia had given her warmth and kindness, but this was her brother. While he kept pushing her to decide, Glenn suddenly appeared and warned her to stay away from the man. Glenn showed the Fool Arcana and asked Rel to help stop this madness. Rel made her choice. As Glenn turned slightly, she stabbed him from behind. There was no emotion on her face. She pulled the blade out, said a quiet goodbye, and told him she would live only for her brother now. Glenn collapsed, bleeding badly. Far away in the forest, Albert was still fighting Eleanor. Using his special vision, Albert suddenly saw Glenn lying on the ground, badly wounded, with Rel and her brother nearby. Eleanor escaped during the chaos. Albert immediately stopped chasing her and focused on Glenn. He then saw Rel rushing toward the island with her sword. Back at the room, Sistine returned carrying food meant for Glenn. The moment she entered, her heart dropped. Rumia was lying on the floor, covered in blood. Rel stood nearby, her clothes stained red. Rel calmly told Sistine that Rumia was alive. When Sistine asked about Glenn, Rel said he was dead. She declared that she now worked for the secret group and would take Rumia with her. Sistine felt anger burning inside her. She warned Rel not to move. Rel challenged her, daring her to attack. Sistine froze. Fear filled her mind. She imagined failing and losing both Rumia and Glenn. Seeing her hesitation, Rel lifted Rumia and left. Sistine stood there, shaking. She tried to tell herself she stayed still to avoid making things worse. But deep down, she knew the truth. She was too scared to act. Moments later, Albert entered the room, carrying Glenn. Glenn was alive but barely. Albert laid him on the bed and told Sistine that Glenn needed healing magic right away. He asked for her help. Sistine broke down crying, holding Glenn's arm. Albert snapped at her, saying tears wouldn't save him. Forcing herself to calm down, Sistine listened as Albert explained what to do. They needed a white magic ritual using both their spiritual strength. Glenn suddenly stopped breathing, though his heartbeat was still weak. Albert told Sistine to keep him alive by giving him air while he prepared the spell. Albert cut his finger and began drawing symbols on the floor. Sistine leaned down and breathed into Glenn's mouth. Meanwhile, Rumia woke up in a dark place, with her hands tied. Rel and her brother stood nearby. They told her she was needed to finish the organization's plan. When Rumia asked about Glenn, Rel coldly said he was gone. Rumia was heartbroken. Rel said she only understood her reason for living after making that choice. She remembered meeting Glenn during a snowstorm, when she felt completely lost. Back in the room, Glenn opened his eyes. Albert was sitting nearby, and Sistine was asleep from exhaustion. Albert told Glenn that Sistine's power had saved his life. Glenn became furious when he learned what Rel had done. Albert reminded him that he had warned him and added that Baldy, the research lab director, had links to the secret group. Glenn demanded to know why Albert hid this earlier and accused him of using Rumia as bait. Albert admitted he regretted following orders. He promised that if Rel stood in their way again, he would stop her himself. Glenn refused that idea. He said Rel could still be brought back. Albert handed Glenn a gun. He said saving Rumia was the top priority, even if hard decisions had to be made. Deep underground, Rumia was being held in a cold bunker. Baldy stood nearby, smiling. He said she should feel honored to be part of his work. He mocked her and claimed the royal family was more corrupt than any dark group. Using tracking magic, Glenn and Albert followed Rumia's location. Baldy noticed them and sent a massive four-eyed beast to stop them. Albert burned it to ashes with fire magic. Another monster appeared deeper inside, but Glenn destroyed it with a single spell. Baldy was shocked and began questioning who Glenn really was. Eleanor sensed danger and ordered Rel to act. Rel stood in front of Glenn near a frozen machine holding Rumia. Her brother asked if she could defeat Glenn. Rel said that was her reason for living. Glenn warned her that she was being lied to and told her brother had died years ago. Rel refused to believe him and attacked. Glenn avoided her strikes and tried to talk. Rumia begged Rel to stop, reminding her of the beach and their friendship. Rel hesitated, but her brother pushed her forward. Rel admitted her brother meant everything to her. Glenn fired a warning shot and asked one question. What is your brother's name? Rel tried to answer. Pain filled her head. She couldn't remember. The man brushed it off, saying names didn't matter. That was enough proof. Glenn disarmed Rel, pinned her using gravity, magic, and destroyed the device holding Rumia. He punched the man and called him a fake. Suddenly, memories flooded back to Rel. Her brother's name was Cyan. She remembered the truth. She wasn't born naturally. She was created in a forbidden experiment. Cyan tried to escape the project. Raynor betrayed him. Elucia died trying to run. Rel finally understood everything. Raynor finally spoke the truth. He said that 2 years ago, Cyan had turned against their group and secretly told the Imperial Army about their crimes. Glenn answered calmly. He revealed that he was the mage Cyan had contacted back then. Glenn said they had planned together to destroy the project. But after that day, Cyan suddenly disappeared. Glenn explained what really happened next. When he later attacked the lab, he found Cyan already dead. Elucia was still alive but badly injured. Glenn said he chose to protect Rel because she carried Elucia's memories inside her. Hearing this, Raynor laughed and proudly admitted that he had messed with Rel's memories to control her. He called her a useless tool. That was the last straw for Glenn. He attacked Raynor with a lightning spell. But before it could hit, 3 copies of Rel appeared and blocked the attack. Raynor smiled and said Glenn could never win while those copies existed. He explained that they had no feelings and followed his orders perfectly. He then commanded them to kill Glenn and sent one clone to finish the real Rel. Glenn chased the clone and knocked it away just in time. Rel watched this and couldn't understand why Glenn would still protect her. She asked him why. Glenn answered honestly. He said no one, neither him nor her classmates, ever saw her as a puppet. He said if she really was empty inside, she wouldn't feel pain, anger, or doubt. He told her to find something worth living for. Those words hit her hard. Rel picked up her sword and turned to face the copies. Seeing her resist, Raynor panicked and tried to use magic. Glenn stopped him instantly by activating the Fool Arcana, canceling all magic around them. Glenn then pointed his gun at Raynor and told Rumia to close her eyes. Raynor screamed and begged for mercy. Glenn pulled the trigger. Click. The gun was empty. It was a bluff. Glenn said he wasn't going to kill him. Instead, he warned Raynor to stay away from his students forever. Then Glenn punched him so hard that Raynor collapsed unconscious. At the same time, Albert finished fighting the monster in the hallway, burning it into ashes. When Glenn returned with Rumia and Rel, Sistine and the other students rushed toward them. Rel lowered her head, ashamed. Before she could say anything, Sistine hugged her tightly, crying. Later, everyone went back to the island beach and played volleyball together. Glenn and Albert watched from far away. Albert said Sistine reminded him of someone named Silver's Sara. Glenn quietly watched Sistine laugh and run with her friends. Elsewhere, Eleanor reported everything to the true leader of the organization. The leader was unhappy about Baldy's failure and ordered everyone to stay hidden and observe what would happen next. After returning from the island, Rel invited Sistine and Rumia to her house for dinner. Her parents welcomed them kindly. Before leaving for the capital, the next day, Rel's mother asked the girls to help look after the house. That night, the 3 girls sat on the balcony under the stars. Rel apologized for everything and thanked them for accepting her. Sistine and Rumia hugged her again and told her they held no grudges. Rel smiled and said they were her closest friends. The next day, Sistine met Celica in the academy library. Celica dropped a book, and Sistine helped pick it up. The book was about the Sky Castle Melgalius. Celica asked about Sistine's grandfather. Sistine said she wanted to fulfill his dream, even if she wasn't sure she could. Celica encouraged her and left. Later, Celica entered a hidden room in the library and stared at a strange map, preparing to enter the underground maze. Soon after, Sistine ran into Glenn in the library. She was surprised to see him there. Glenn told her he wanted to thank her for saving his life. Sistine turned red, remembering the CPR. At that moment, Rel and Rumia arrived. Seeing Sistine's face, Rumia misunderstood. Rel immediately pulled out her sword and chased Glenn around the library until he was kicked outside. As Glenn stumbled out, a carriage almost hit him. Wind magic suddenly lifted him away. The rider stepped out. It was Cleitos, Leos, a visiting teacher. He introduced himself and shocked everyone by saying he was Sistine's fiancé. Sistine immediately denied it, but Leo reminded her of a childhood promise. Glenn warned Leo not to mess with Sistine. Leo fired back, telling Glenn not to insult his future wife. Leo recognized Glenn's name and said he had heard rumors about his strange teaching style. In the principal's office, Four Eyes was thrilled to have a famous teacher like Leo. Celica, however, felt uneasy. Four Eyes teased her, asking if she was afraid Leo would outshine Glenn. Later, Leo openly praised Sistine in the courtyard, embarrassing her. Glenn made a sarcastic comment and got shoved by Sistine's wind magic. Leo taught Glenn's class next. The students clapped, while Rel slept on Sistine's shoulder. Glenn noticed Leo explained advanced topics, clearly even things the class wasn't ready for. Rumia said she finally understood why Glenn always told them to think deeply about magic. Glenn admitted he felt a little jealous. After class, Leo asked Sistine for her honest opinion. When she praised his lesson, he proudly said he passed his first test as a husband. He then asked her to walk with him. While walking, Leo talked about their childhood and said their bond would grow stronger. Glenn, Rumia, and Rel secretly watched. Suddenly, Leo proposed. Sistine refused. She said her promise to her grandfather in the Sky Castle mattered more. Leo laughed and called her dream unrealistic. Sistine stood firm. At that moment, Glenn jumped out and told Leo not to mock her dreams. Leo told him to stay out of it. Sistine then shocked everyone by saying Glenn was involved because they were lovers. Glenn quickly played along. Furious, Leo challenged Glenn to a duel. Glenn accepted. Leo agreed to decide the time and place later and walked away. After everything settled down, Glenn went back to his class and told the students about what had happened. He joked around, saying maybe he should turn his fake relationship with Sistine into a real one, marry into money, and live an easy life without working. The class laughed. Glenn then told them to train seriously because they would soon face Leo's class. He promised that when he became rich and famous, he wouldn't forget them. That night, Glenn met Albert at a bar to talk. When Glenn mentioned the duel with Leo over Sistine, Albert couldn't believe his ears. He called Glenn pathetic for fighting over a girl he didn't even love, just for money. Glenn brushed it off, saying that if he won, he'd never have to work again. Glenn then asked why Albert wanted to meet. Albert shared troubling news. Someone was smuggling angel dust again. Glenn was shocked because the method to create it was supposed to be destroyed last year. Before Glenn could say more, Albert warned him to stay out of it. He said that if angel dust still existed, then Sarah's death meant nothing. Glenn went quiet. He admitted that every time he looked at Sistine, he thought of Sarah. After leaving the bar, Glenn walked alone through the city. He remembered Sarah cheering for his dream of becoming a sorcerer of justice. He wondered if she wanted that dream for herself too. He almost promised to protect her, but the words never came. At the same time, Leo sat inside a carriage with a shadowy figure. The figure told him everything was going perfectly now that Glenn had challenged him. He told Leo to make sure he won the duel. On the day of the battle, Mr. Four Eyes stood in charge. He announced that the duel would last 3 hours, and the team that took control of the enemy side would win. He was angry that Glenn had dragged students into a fight over a girl, and told Leo to crush him. The duel started fast. Leo's team immediately knocked out 2 of Glenn's students. Leo's class split into groups of 3 and spread across the field. The teachers watching believed Leo had already won. But slowly, things changed. Glenn's team began winning close fights. Instead of groups of 3, they worked in pairs of 2. The teachers thought this style was rude and against tradition. Four Eyes said Glenn was the kind of teacher who cared only about victory. Leo switched plans and ordered long-range attacks, but some of his students ran into Rel, who fought alone and avoided every attack easily. Leo then led his team into the forest, planning a final move. Glenn blocked their path, mocked them, and vanished into the trees. Leo's students chased him only to fall into traps. Glenn played with them, knocking them out one by one. When 3 hours ended, neither side had won. Four Eyes declared the duel a draw. Glenn praised his class. Leo yelled at his students for failing. Glenn walked up to Leo and said the loss was Leo's fault for poor leadership. Furious, Leo threw down his glove and challenged Glenn again. He swore he would never stop until Sistine married him and gave up her dream of the Sky Castle. Glenn accepted. Before anything else could be decided, Sistine stormed in. She yelled at both of them, saying she wasn't a trophy to fight over. She scolded Glenn for using dirty tricks. Glenn ignored her and told Leo they would settle it tomorrow one-on-one. Sistine slapped Glenn, told him she hated him, and left. As Sistine and Rumia walked away, Sistine vented non-stop. She couldn't believe Glenn saw her as a way to get rich. Rumia tried to calm her down. She said Glenn didn't feel like that kind of person and there had to be another reason. Rumia decided she needed to talk to Glenn herself. Leo gave her a bad feeling just like Burks once did. Elsewhere, Albert stood with soldiers over another dead body. The person had died from angel dust. Albert said this was the 5th case, and things were getting worse. Leo, meanwhile, traveled home, filled with anger. He saw Glenn as weak and planned to crush him not just to marry Sistine, but to secure his family's power and future leadership. That night, Glenn sat alone, thinking. He knew he had to win. Losing wasn't an option. Sistine approached him after hearing him talk to himself. She asked why he challenged Leo. Glenn joked again about money. When she didn't laugh, he spoke honestly. He said she reminded him of Sarah. Glenn told her everything. He once loved magic and dreamed of justice, but blood magic showed him horror. Sarah kept him going. When she died in his arms during a mission, he quit magic and shut himself off. He admitted he didn't know why he wanted to fight Leo so badly. Maybe it was because Sistine worked so hard for her dream. Maybe he wanted to protect her dream because he failed to protect Sarah. Sistine confessed her own fear. She felt she was disappointing her grandfather. The deeper she studied magic, the more unsure she felt. Seeing Glenn fight for her dream gave her strength. Then Leo appeared. He mocked Glenn, saying he was using a sad story for sympathy. He revealed he knew Glenn's past as a military mage. Glenn told him to leave. Leo refused and said someone with blood on their hands didn't deserve a normal life. Glenn snapped. He warned Leo they wouldn't need to wait until tomorrow. Leo laughed and told him to rejoin the special forces. Glenn attacked using Fool's Arcana, but Leo fought back using the same combat style as the Imperial Army. Glenn was knocked down. Leo summoned creatures called Topas and attacked with flying swords. Glenn realized too late that Fool's Arcana didn't work. Leo wasn't using normal magic. Leo stood over Glenn and demanded a real fight tomorrow. Glenn stood up silently and walked away. Sistine tried to follow, but Leo grabbed her hand and proposed again. This time, he threatened her. If she refused, he would reveal Rumia's true identity and let others experiment on her. The next morning, the whole academy was buzzing with rumors. Everyone was saying that Sistine had accepted Leo's proposal, and that the wedding would happen in just 1 week. Some students felt angry and confused. Glenn had not been seen since the news spread, and many believed he had run away from the fight. When Sistine entered the classroom, her classmates immediately surrounded her. They asked if it was true, was she really giving up her dream and marrying Leo? Sistine looked down and quietly said that dreams don't always come true. Before anyone could say more, Leo walked into the room, grabbed her arm, and proudly announced their engagement. The room fell silent as they left together. Afterward, Rel spoke to Rumia. She said she was sure Leo was dangerous and suggested they work together to stop him. Rumia stopped her and said Glenn already knew everything. He had promised to handle it himself before disappearing. A week later, Rumia and Rel waited outside a room for Sistine. When she stepped out wearing her wedding dress, both of them were stunned by how beautiful she looked. Rumia wanted to ask her something, but Sistine gently told them to go ahead to the hall without her. Once they left, Sistine sat alone and began to cry. The wedding ceremony started. With a heavy heart, Sistine said yes. Just as Leo leaned in to kiss her, the doors burst open. Glenn rushed inside and shouted that he objected. He threw smoke into the hall, grabbed Sistine, and escaped with her. When they reached a safe place, Sistine told Glenn she had no choice but to marry Leo. Glenn replied that he knew Leo had threatened to reveal Rumia's secret. Sistine asked where Glenn had been all this time. He said he was trying to find a way to stop the wedding and defeat Leo. That's when Sistine finally realized the truth. Leo never loved her. He only wanted power. Before they could talk more, armed people suddenly appeared. Their eyes were empty, and they moved strangely. Glenn realized they were victims of angel dust. Back at the wedding hall, chaos broke out. Rel prepared to fight, but Albert and Imperial soldiers arrived. They told Rel to help students escape while they handled the attackers. In the alley, Glenn told Sistine to run, but she refused. They fought together. The attackers were incredibly fast and strong, but Glenn shielded Sistine with his body. He remembered a tragedy from his past and swore not to let it happen again. After the attackers fell, Sistine pushed Glenn away, shaken. Glenn asked if she was scared of him. Before she could answer, slow clapping echoed nearby. A man stepped forward. At first, they thought it was Leo, but he laughed and revealed his true identity, Jadis Loffen, a former executioner from the Imperial Mage Army. Sistine asked what happened to Leo. Jadis coldly said he had controlled Leo with drugs. Leo's body couldn't handle it, and he died. Glenn told Sistine to leave. Jadis allowed it, warning her not to interfere again. Once she was gone, Glenn understood the truth. Jadis had planned everything. He wanted to fight Glenn and remove powerful figures from the Empire. Jadis bragged that once he gained the Akashic records, he would rule the world with his twisted idea of justice. He summoned ghost-like creatures to attack. Glenn fired at them and tried to surprise Jadis, but Jadis dodged easily. Fire melted Glenn's ice spell, and the ghosts injured Glenn's arm. Jadis mocked him, even telling him to greet Sarah in the afterlife. Just as Jadis prepared the final blow, a strong wind blasted him away. Glenn looked up and saw Sistine standing there. He shouted that she shouldn't be here. Sistine refused to leave. She said she came back because she couldn't lose him. Jadis rose from the rubble, furious. Glenn struggled to stand, then removed his coat. He told Sistine they had to fight together. Sistine made him promise they would both survive. Jadis summoned powerful beings called tulpas, but Glenn and Sistine worked in perfect sync. They destroyed them quickly. Sistine used wind magic to launch Glenn forward. Glenn punched Jadis so hard that he slammed into a wall. Desperate, Jadis summoned Lady Justice, hoping to end it in one strike. But Sistine's magic broke through. Glenn charged and pinned Jadis against the wall. Jadis sneered, saying Glenn only won because of Sistine. Glenn looked back and saw Sistine exhausted and barely standing. Suddenly, Jadis used the last of his strength, ranted about destroying the Empire, and vanished, promising this wasn't over. When the danger finally passed, Glenn gently lifted Sistine onto his back and began walking toward their friends, determined to protect her no matter what came next. And that's where this video ends. Watch the next one and take care.